Buster Olney, thanks to Buffalo Wild Wings, joins us every Thursday at 5:15. And Buster, today's the NFL Draft. Now, if you were drafting your own team with the players in Major League Baseball and you were building your own baseball team, who are the first 2 or 3 guys that are currently in Major League Baseball right now that you would select to build a team around?
Mike Trout, he'd be the first player taken. Clayton Kershaw and Matt Harvey. Those 3 guys because of the age. I mean, Miguel Cabrera is the best hitter on the planet, but he's older. But if you were starting a franchise from scratch, those are the 3 guys.
I knew Trout. I knew you would go Trout right away. That was not a shock to me. Harvey, even with the elbow, you're willing to take the chance and that he'll rebound all the way?
Especially after watching him last week. I mean, he's sort of redefining expectations, probably not for the good, for what could happen with someone coming back from Tommy John surgery. In fact, one of my theories is a lot of the conversation around Masahiro Tanaka is shaped by, what's going on with Harvey, and he was that great last weekend and that dominant, and it was very interesting to talk to members of the Yankees on Sunday, the day after Harvey pitched, and to hear them just rave about where they think he is right now.
All right, Buster. So speaking of Tanaka, at what point does he go under the knife and have Tommy John surgery?
First off, I just don't think that's within the realm of the conversation right now. Look, he's a time bomb. It's eventually going to happen. We just don't know when. But, what happened earlier this week, I can tell you, I talked to Brian Cashman, the Yankees general manager, the night that they told reporters that he was going to have to go on the disabled list. And Brian said, look, if this was a playoff game tomorrow, he'd pitch. And if he were a middle infielder, it would be the comparable injury that we're talking about with what Tanaka has is it would be a slight groin strain. They really don't think this is that big of a deal, and they're convinced that he's going to be back within a month. They've been told by 3 different doctors, look, he doesn't need Tommy John surgery. And I think that if his performance was bad in April, then we would probably look at it, Tanaka in a completely different context. But what the Yankees have seen from him so far, even with his partial tear in his elbow, he's a pretty good pitcher. His last 2 starts, 1 run allowed in 12 and a third innings, 14 strikeouts, 2 walks. And so I think the Yankees' mindset now is, look, this is just a minor injury. Where that's not to say that sometime down the road he may not need Tommy John surgery, but for now their thought is he'll be back in a month, and they'll hope that he gets back to where he was before he got hurt.
Much like last season, Buster, it's completely Tanaka time. Is this one of those situations where we're just overanalyzing, or should he adapt? Okay.
Yeah, and I don't mean you. I've sort of actually been surprised by the conversation, in the media, where I read columns the day after this came out, and they're saying, he should have Tommy John surgery now. Well, look, when James Andrews and 2 other doctors are telling the Yankees and Tanaka, you don't need Tommy John surgery, I would defer to them. I mean, the rest of us are really smart who are in the media, but, maybe we all slept at the Holiday Inn Express. I just think it's probably not, what we should be doing is saying, well, the player should definitely get Tommy John surgery. And Stefania Bell, who works for ESPN, and she's like an injury expert for us, she mentioned when I had her on the podcast recently about the idea that, everybody who has Tommy John comes back and is better. That's not true. The success rate is not 100%. There have been pitchers like Manny Benuelos, who used to be in the Yankees organization, who had Tommy John surgery that haven't come back. And if he's functional and he's as good a pitcher as he was before this little blip happened the other day, hey, why wouldn't you just keep him out there?
Buster Olney thinks the Buffalo Wild Wings with Armen Levack on 104.5 The Team. And Buster, it does feel with the Tanaka injury, it does feel like after the Yankees last year had 75% of their starting rotation go down with injuries, that they are more prepared for attrition this year in their starting rotation. Would you agree with that?
No doubt about it. And you know what? And if you remember when they lost those 4 or 5 starters last year, they actually handled it pretty well. They wound up with having sort of right in the middle of the pack in terms of the rotation performance. They are better prepared. Michael Pineda is 1 year further along and coming back and establishing himself. You look at the other members of the rotation, I think they got better options. They certainly have a much deeper bullpen than they did a year ago. Right now they have the second-best bullpen ERA in baseball. Look, I mean, you hate losing a guy like Tanaka, but I don't think it's the end of the world, especially because if, in fact, the Yankees at some point, need to go out and get help. I know that they feel like that Chris Capuano is going to come back sometime at the end of May, and then in June they're going to have Ivan Nova back. But let's say they decided that they need to go trade for pitching. General managers all over baseball are telling me, look, you can find pitching. Finding pitching in 2015 is not a problem because offensive numbers are so far down. It's finding hitting that's the real issue.
Now, when you say finding pitching, is the name that keeps popping up out there is Cole Hamels. Is this a realistic thing, or the Yankees look inward to find that pitching?
Well, I don't think they're seriously talking about Cole Hamels. I think first off, they would go through just as the Red Sox are going to. I think they probably run through their internal options and see how they do with those, with Capuano, with Nova. They'll see if Tanaka can come back, and if they need to make an adjustment at that point, then I think they will. But I don't see the Yankees being as highly motivated as, say, a team like the Red Sox or a team like the Dodgers in a Cole Hamels conversation, because they've got that kind of pitching depth. And just to circle back real quick on Tanaka, I do think that one legitimate issue to talk about, and I'm sure the Yankees are too, is he had this little blip with his wrist/forearm after making his first start on 4 days rest. You know what? Maybe it's to the point with the Yankees where they need to start saying, no matter what else happens, we're going to have Tanaka pitch on 5 days rest, because that's what he was accustomed to in Japan. He's too important to our rotation otherwise, and we have enough weapons in the organization to be able to do that. If we give Tanaka a better chance to be better, why not take that approach?
Fair enough. So let's not freak out about Tanaka, but if anything's going to change or be tweaked, it's not the split finger, it's not his delivery, it's the amount of days of rest that he gets.
I think that's probably the first thing the Yankees will look at.
Perfect. Buster Olney, thanks to Buffalo Wild Wings every Thursday with Armen and Levack on the team. Sticking with the arms, Betances and Miller seem like a really good 1-2 punch. Is this exactly how the Yankees drawn it up? Because Girardi's still being really weird with naming Miller as the closer.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason why he doesn't is, why go down that road? And I think the two guys, and I've spoken to both Miller and to Betances about that, they don't care. They're both, their attitude is like, yeah, whatever, and that's great. What a great situation for them to be in with them. We know that Miller was dominant. I haven't seen the update in the numbers in the last 48 hours, but going into that game on Sunday, he had struck out more than half the hitters that he had faced, 15 out of 29. And I don't know if you guys remember this the other night. Michael Kadire came up in the eighth inning against Betances, and he was breaking off these ridiculous sliders. And at one point, Kadire stepped back, and he looked back at the home plate umpire, Jim Wolf, and he said something, and Wolf started laughing. And after the half inning, I was circling to the other side of the field, and I stopped Jim, the home plate umpire, who's great guy, and I said, "Hey, what was that about? What did Kadire say to you?" And he said that Kadire, after the great Betances breaking ball, turned and looked at him and said, "That went around the plate, didn't it?" And Wolf was like, "No, that didn't go around the plate. Come on." I mean, that's how great a breaking ball Betances has.
Wow.
Buster, when we look at the new mentor for Didi Gregorius and A-Rod, is that a comforting thing, or do we get worried because he is one of the most hated men outside of New York?
First off, I don't think the thing about him being hated is an issue. For me, when I saw that, I just kind of wonder. And look, Didi might be thrilled with it that he had someone pull him aside. But I was at the ballpark. I think it was on Saturday, and he had another coach talking to him. And what you hear all the time about Gregorius from evaluators is they think he's thinking too much in the field, that he's not just simply reacting, which he's always done very well, and now he's beginning to really sort of absorb this. And I watched that the other day with Alex. It's got nothing to do with Alex or his history, but I was just thinking, boy, at some point, don't just leave the guy alone. and not have him in his situation where he's getting a lot of words of advice from a lot of different people, and he's thinking about what everyone's telling him, and just let him go back to reacting. Because I think I know that's how the Yankees view this at this point, is that he's in a defensive slump, he's got a confidence issue in terms of catching the ball, and then eventually he'll get out of it. And that's the part that made me cringe the other day when I watched that, because Didi's such a nice guy, and he's never going to tell someone, look, I don't need to hear your advice anymore, I got it. And the more people they're throwing at him, the more I'm concerned about that.
Interesting. With A-Rod, Buster, the Yankees, how will they react when he ties and breaks Willie Mays' record?
I think the teammates are going to be excited for him, and maybe a few of them even more excited than they would have been, if you know what I mean. In other words, they know the conversation that's going on. They know all the cameras and the reporters are going to be locked in on what their reaction is. Alex is a guy who's liked in that clubhouse, and I wouldn't be surprised to see the players kind of put on a little bit of a show. In terms of the organization, it's exactly where it stood before. Where this is going to be contested. The Yankees are not going to pay him the money. It's going to go to an arbitrator. As I told you guys before, I think the whole story is really overblown because I don't think it's going to have any impact on the relationship between Alex and the Yankees, which is not good, and it's not going to get better. It's just something that the representatives of Alex and the lawyers from the Yankees, Major League Baseball, are going to be working out behind the scenes.
All right, Buster. Well, we've been with the Subway Series behind us now. A lot of animosity has been put away finally between Mets and Yankees fans, but we still have the question going with the injuries, with the issues, trying to get better. Which one of the two teams do you see making the big trade first?
Boy, I don't think the Mets are going to make a big trade until they absolutely are in a position where they have to. And I think the Yankees will add, but I don't think we know yet exactly what their priority is going to be. We always see them in recent years. They've waited until the last couple of weeks before the trade deadline to make their big move. But I think they're both going to be in a position where we're going to have that conversation, because I don't know how you guys felt after watching that 3-game series. I know the Mets lost 2 or 3. I felt better about them than I had before, because when you look at the depth of their lineup and you saw how good Harvey was, it just seems like so much is possible for them. And, I'm one of the few idiots who picked the Yankees to make the playoffs back in spring.
Yeah.
So I still think that they're a better team than a lot of people think, because of how great that bullpen is, and because, generally speaking, Didi Gregorius aside, they should have a pretty good defense.
You are so surprised, though, by how well the Yankees have played off the bat, or did you expect?
No,
okay.
No, I'm really not. I mean, that's why I picked them to make the playoffs, because I think that their bullpen is so great that it can make up for a lot of ills, especially in an era when starting pitchers are going 5 innings, they're not going 8. They're going 5 1/3, and the weapons that the Yankees bring out are unbelievable, and that's why I picked them. The Mets are definitely better than I thought. Lagares, and to see his offensive improvement as time goes on, to see Lucas Duda's offensive improvement. And here's the big thing. Once every 5 days, the Mets are the best team in baseball. When Matt Harvey takes the mound, they're the best team in baseball, and that's a big weapon to have as you go through a long season. You're trying to avoid losing streaks.
Buster Olney thanks to Buffalo Wild Wings with Armen and Levack on 104.5 The Team. You mentioned Juan Lagares. You wrote a great story about the impact that he has on the Mets and how good this guy really is.
Yeah, Kadire told me, and he played in Minnesota with Torrey Hunter, and he talked about how he reminds him of Torrey Hunter in terms of how good he is on defense. But this was the one that really got my interest about Lagares' potential as an offensive player, and he drew the comparison to another one of his former teammates, Carlos Gomez, who is become an all-star with the Milwaukee Brewers. Because I had always heard, and I mentioned this to Michael, look, I mostly hear that he's going to be outstanding defensively and he's going to be okay at the plate. And Kadire goes, no, he's going to be better than that. And it just so happened that right after that, Lagares was in the cage, and he hit a ball into the second deck in left field in Yankee Stadium, and he smoked the ball off the fence in left center field, and Kadire turned around and looked at me and goes, see? And, I think this is a guy, we know he's the Andrelton Simmons of center fielders in terms of how great he is defensively, but Michael Kadire knows a lot about hitting, and I'll defer to him. He's going to be better than what we think offensively during the course of his career.
Buster, was the ghost game one of the more strange things you've ever seen in baseball?
Yeah, and part of me wished I could be there. Tim Kirchin had some great descriptions of different things that were going on during the game that the players all talked about how, as the game is going on, they could hear the play-by-play guys up in the press box, most notably Gary Thorne, who's got that booming voice that he has. And so, it'd be pitch to pitch. They're hearing it called in a way that they hadn't heard before. Imagine if you were the home plate umpire and there's a close pitch and they're critiquing your work right there and you can hear every bit of it. That's unusual. And I'm sure you guys saw this. There were a group of Orioles fans who had gathered outside the gates in left center field. And during the course of the game, every time something good happened for the Orioles, you'd hear this big cheer, and it reminded me of that book we all read as kids, Horton Hears a Who, where you had the Who's in Whoville who were yelling to let everybody know, we are here, we are here. It was really strange.
All right, Buster. Well, earlier this season, I asked you a question. You told me to ask it again later. Well, I had to wait a little bit for Cologne to lose a game, and the Yankees did win the series. Who's the better team, Mets or Yankees?
I hate that question so much.
You did tell me I could ask again, though.
I'm going to go back and forth on this all year. I'm going to say today I'd put the Mets in the lead by nose. I still, as I say, I picked the Yankees to make the playoffs. I stand by that. But with Tanaka going down, a little bit of uncertainty about the rotation, so I'll give the Mets an edge because they've got Matt Harvey and Jacob deGrom.
All right, I won't ask again for a while, but you told me I could.
You can keep asking me, and I'm just going to continue to just grind my teeth every time you do.
Don't worry, you probably will.
I have that effect on people, Buster.
I'll ask every week. Buster Olney with Armen and Levack on the team. Buster, I appreciate your time today. We'll be looking at ESPN.com tonight for your pick-by-pick breakdown of the NFL draft. I'm sure you'll be have all the analysis on that, right?
I will be all over when the Vikings come up with their pick, and we need a cornerback.
There you go. Very nice.
What are you doing this week? Like, it's a big weekend for sports, Yankees, Sox, but you got the Derby, you got the draft, you got Mayweather, Pacquiao. What does your sports weekend look like, Buster?
Red Sox, Yankees. That's it.
That's all.
Going up to Fenway, there's really no other time. There's no time for anything else. It's only Red Sox, Yankees. After we see the Vikings take the player that will probably disappoint me in the future.
To use a horse reference, he's got the blinders on.
There you go.
There you go. Buster Olney, appreciate you, baby.
He's the best.
Okay, guys. Take care.
Buster Olney, thanks to Buffalo Wild Wings at Clifton Park. And Levack, we love going to Buffalo Wild Wings at Clifton Park. Of course, they're going to have the Mayweather-Pacquiao fight this weekend as well.
Yeah, perfect place to watch it. I mean, you're talking about great food, great drinks, great people, making sure that you have both those other things. I'm thinking, not a bad place to go watch.
And you and I can wear our staff shirts.
We just walk in the kitchen.
Walk in the kitchen and get whatever we want.
And we already have, Wings for a Year. We're good to go.
Yeah. Do you think we have to bring those gigantic 6-foot cards every time we come in?
John told me we have to bring the cards.
Well, we probably bring them in just to be obnoxious anyway.
Absolutely.
See you at Buffalo Wild Wings this weekend.